Welcome to the November 15th meeting of the Annapolis Transportation Board. We are here just before the holidays and intend to take on a weighty issue today, one that's been on our minds for some time. And just before turning the meeting over to our speakers, who I'll introduce momentarily, could Tom Schock, could you do the roll call and record those who are present?
Sure. So I've already done that. Do you want me to walk through the names? Is that kind of like procedure?
No, I think it's kind of obvious. So in the interest of time, we will just we'll go on. If there are no motions to alter the agenda, I will assume it is approved and move on to our speakers. Our speakers today are speaking for Park City, Utah, a city somewhat smaller than Annapolis. That is much of the time. However, it swells in its population to maybe even exceed Annapolis population from time to time. And the ski season is one of those surge periods. Sarah Pierce is the assistant city manager for the city, and Jerry Benson was formerly head of the Utah Transit Authority, and I gather, correct me if I'm wrong, maybe a consultant to the city in your present role. That's really all I have to say to you two, except that we're very grateful to you for appearing on short notice to tell us what your experience has been with fare-free transit. And we're particularly interested in how you pay for it. We have found that it represents that the city contribution to the total operating cost is a small fraction. And we are going to use that small fraction as an argument for biting the bullet and making it fare free. But at this point, I'd like to turn it over to you. Jerry, you may have a presentation that you can share on the screen as well.
Right, I'll get that up right now. And looks like it's there. Can you see that, Sarah?
Yep.
All right.
Do you want to put it in presentation mode or?
Yeah, there you go.
There you go. So we're excited to be here talking to you today and welcome questions along the way. We just have a few slides and then we can open it up for questions after as well. Kurt already did our introduction, so I think we could move on, Jerry.
All right.
So just a little bit about Park City Transit. We have been fare free since 1975. And in fact, the transit system started as fare free. So one of the questions that Kurt had asked is how did we make that transition? And we actually never did because we just started out way back then as fare free. At this point, we now have 12 bus routes, 150 full-time seasonal operators, and 50 vehicles. So it's grown quite a bit over the years. We hosted the 2002 Winter Olympic Games, and that is one opportunity that we had to really beef up the system and make some investments, which we did. We are now working toward having all electric buses for our fixed routes that require a large bus. We have 13 right now, and we're in the process of purchasing more. We have 2.8 million annual riders, and we just recently split our service. We were running it basically for the county, across the whole county, although the service didn't really go outside of Park City much. But we just split operations and the county has launched their own transit system called High Valley Transit. So we now have 2 transit systems in our region and we just did that in July. So we're still kind of working through the kinks, but it was an amicable separation. I'm really excited to see how that will pay off and service the region going forward. And we'll get into that a little bit, but that's just kind of a quick overview. And then our budget, we bring in about $13 million a year in transit revenue, and that comes from taxes. Yeah. We have several taxes that are implemented by the county, of which we get a share. And that really is the bulk of it. I want to say 9-10 million from taxes. We apply for and we have received every year grants from the FTA, which if you're not already doing that, it's a great program, and Jerry can talk more deeply about that. And then we have several development agreements and other agreements with different condo associations, large developments that pay into a system to provide that transit service. So we're shuttling visitors and residents and workforce. And so we've kind of asked everybody to pay in to that. We do get a piece of the resort sales tax, so that also helps. Our operating budget is $11 million. And we usually throw off about 2 million of that revenue goes into capital, but we also apply for a lot of grants for capital projects. And that amount can vary each year depending on what big projects we have that we're working on. Right now, we're working on building a new park and ride outside of town, and that's going to be a fairly hefty project that'll be in next year's budget. And just to give you kind of the lay of the land as far as how the transit department factors into the city, our city operating budget is about 63 million, and the capital budget is about 73 million. So we're doing a lot of capital projects. We're growing like crazy and trying to keep up. But that's the budget in a nutshell. Happy to answer specific questions either now or when we get through the rest of our slides. Up to you guys.
I have a question right off the bat, and that is, you suggested that there was a workforce contribution. Employers are somehow paying into your revenue stream. Is that correct?
Not directly, but some of the developments over the years as part of their development agreement pay into the system. And so that kind of pays for some of the workforce. And, of course, there's a resort sales tax that pays in a large chunk, and those are our two largest employers, Deer Valley and Park City. So we get a lot of the, benefits from that sales tax resorts.
Is that specific only to the resorts, or is there a general business sales tax?
There are both.
Yeah.
So there's a general business sales tax that cuts across any retail sales in the area. And then there's a specific resort tax on top of that, the resorts pay into.
I see. Okay. And both provide transportation revenues?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
So yes, transit's funded by local sales room and resort taxes. So we also have a TRT, which I think supplies some taxes, but not as much. We use that money for other things, but we get a piece of that. We've been fare free from the beginning. We have 15-minute bus frequency on pretty much all of our routes. And the transit system is part of a larger system that we use to manage our overall traffic dilemma. We have a lot of traffic problems. So paid parking is a part of that. We don't have a lot of parking here. And we have been experimenting with dynamic pricing, when we have big events and big weekends. We do have some park and ride lots, but we're building more. We have some really high volume events, not just the busy ski weekends, but we also have Sundance Film Festival every year in January, which on any given day could be 100,000 extra people in town. We're a town of 7,500 normally. But on a busy summer day, we could have 30, 40,000 visitors in town. So it's this really interesting balance of providing service for residents, workers, the resorts, and visitors. And we're not perfect, but we're getting there. Am I doing this one too, Jerry? I can't remember.
Yeah, I was planning on it. I'm happy
Yeah.
to chime in whenever you like.
Okay, so we just went through a refresh of our visioning, kind of what are the priorities in the city? We did a big, robust outreach with our community, and transportation was named as one of the top 4 priorities for the community. And that means traffic mitigation, enhancing our transit service, transportation projects, the whole gamut. And so we're, it's top of mind all the time, and we're working on it constantly. We have to coordinate transportation with our land use, parking, and economic development policies. We talked about the park and rides. The 2 resorts in town, Deer Valley and Vail, Park City, are going through major development process for base developments. They're in the planning commission stage right now, but we are predicting like really big changes with regard to how our transit systems operate at both of those bases. And we've been working really closely with them on, making sure that we can have transit first priority and traffic signal priorities for transit to really move people in and out, because they will not have enough parking for all of their skiers, and nor should they. We don't want that many cars in town. We just don't have the capacity. We have 2 entry corridors into city. They're both state roads. So it's also, requires a really strong relationship with the Utah Department of Transportation. They manage those state roads. They snowplow those roads. They manage the communication about those roads, and they cut right into the middle of town. So that can be challenging, as I'm sure you can imagine. We are working on Brt Bus Rapid Transit that will come in on one of those state roads, and we're really excited about that. We will have shoulder running transit lanes, and that's really the only way that we can convince people to get out of their cars, is if transit is moving much faster than the car traffic. So all of this requires major regional coordination and collaboration. And one thing Jerry and I were just talking about earlier today is that we have this one bus route that goes from Salt Lake City to Park City, and it is not a free fare. It's, what is it, Jerry? $5, I believe.
Yeah, it's $5 each way, so a $10 a day fare.
And that's been, it's somewhat used. The resorts will buy passes for their employees to ride that express bus from Salt Lake so that we don't have cars up here. But it's something that we'd like to grow. If the buses are not full, it would be good if we could get more people to ride it. And we've just been talking about how we could make that fare free as well.
I'm glad you brought that up. That seems an important connection to not only to Salt Lake, but to the airport. What is the frequency on that bus? Is it, are there just 1 or 2 a day, or are there many trips?
Yeah, it's just a few trips in the morning and in the evening.
Oh.
In the wintertime, they add a couple, but it's peak hour service is all.
Annapolis has a similar problem. We are the state capital of the state of Maryland, and we have no connections to any airport by public transit. And this is nor to the Washington, D.C. metro system. It's an odd situation, and one I hope we can correct at some time in the future.
So as Sarah said, we're happy to take questions whenever you like. I'm just about to kind of pivot to talk about the Utah Transit Authority. So maybe I'll just pause here for a second and see if there are questions for Sarah about Park City before I move on.
Sarah, I had a question. Earlier you mentioned that I think it was some developments in the area, or they have an agreement and they are part of your revenue source for your transit system. Is that correct?
Yeah, and it's all kind of based on when they go through the planning process, or when they went through the planning process early on. Those were kind of negotiated with the Planning Commission as far as what kind of impacts they are going to have on the community. and where they're going to need to mitigate some of those impacts. And so it's very different for each one. So I couldn't really speak to the specific.
I was just curious if those were agreements that were renewed like every 5 years, if there are situations where maybe a development for whatever reason can no longer afford to pay into the transit system and how that affects the transit system as a whole.
I believe those are all in perpetuity, but I could be
Okay.
wrong. I've only been here a year and a half, and I haven't heard of that
Okay.
renewal situation.
Got it.
The resorts certainly have an interest in having a good transit system for their own employees, if nothing else. Could you, I don't know how to ask this question without being somewhat crude about it, but was the development process and permits connected with it somehow contingent on securing a satisfactory funding agreement for transit?
I can't speak to that. They were all different. I can speak to the 2 resort development projects that are underway right now. We're not really at that stage where money's, being discussed yet, but as they look to figure out how much parking they need, building hotels, building condos, adding to the retail and experience kind of village for their guests, that with it is going to come additional skiers and visitors. And so we have to figure out where to put all those people. And we're pretty much every weekend, the resorts hit overflow parking status. So something's got to give. We have to work together to figure out where all those cars go.
Well, this really perks my interest because to my knowledge, Annapolis has no similar arrangement with those attractions that we have that draw tourists in.
The thing is, I think that with Annapolis, except for the Naval Academy, which of course still only has events occasionally, ours are not as constant as your resorts are. Ours are, we have 2 supposedly the world's largest in-water boat shows. They each happen once a year in October for a week. So there's 2 weeks where we have some really horrendous traffic. And we have some other things, but it isn't a constant, which sounds like yours is quite a constant. Never mind your festivals and stuff, just from your resorts. And we don't have anything quite like that. We are a city, we are a destination city like you are. So we do get a lot of visitors all the time, but not in that kind of quantity that we do when there's a festival or something like that. So, and we've certainly talked about how to approach our major businesses and our major employers, such as malls and things like that, because of the fact that certainly the essential workers are a lot of the people who need to ride the bus. And so therefore you want to get them there and you want to get them back and you want that type of bus service. So that's part of our plan is to do that. Do you work with your business associations, say like your downtown business association as well, and work on seeing what do they kick in something? Do they help with the cost of the bus?
I would say they do in a roundabout way because of the sales tax money that we receive that pays for it. We do work really closely with them because right now, as I'm sure you guys are having this trouble too, is just attracting talent and keeping talent and competing for workforce. And so we're trying to all band together, businesses, nonprofits, the Park City Chamber, and how can we ensure that all of our businesses are well, staffed. And one of those things is transportation, because there is no parking really. And so providing, free bus or free bus passes is really important. And I would think that that would be a good selling point for your business community as well.
When you
Indeed.
instituted your sales tax, did you get a referendum that and do any kind of study or go out into the community to ask them if they what were the things they wanted from the transportation system, and if they wanted them, they had to realize that the money had to come from somewhere. So the money would come here, or here, and one would be the sales tax. Where did you go out and ask your citizens about the sales tax and get their backing before you instituted it, or how did you go about it?
We did go out to the citizens, and Jerry, do you have detail on that?
So we've been at this for a long time. So the first transit tax was implemented in Park City in I think the mid 1980s. And then there have been 5 additional ones since then. And the most recent ones, the state legislature allowed the county to impose it without a public referendum. So that was a first for us. But the process typically had been, yes, you go survey the needs and interests of your community. These sales taxes are either by they're countywide or within a transit district. And so, you have to convince a majority of the voters within that area that it's worth paying more money for everything they buy for the transit service they get. And so, yes, that is a normal part of the process, to do some surveying and research in advance, and then give people an idea of what they're going to get for their increased investment.
What is the magnitude of the tax? Is it like a 0.5% on top of the sort of the standard sales tax?
So if you add all the transit taxes that are available to a community in the state of Utah, it's about 1.25%. If you pass all of them.
But how about your tax, though?
I'm sorry?
Your singular tax, the tax at Park City, what is that one?
Park City participates with Summit County on all of them. So there's a cent and a quarter available in the region. And we share that, as Sarah said, we split transit service with the county. So they're getting some of that and the city's getting some of it.
Okay.
But 1.25 cents, and that's, that's pretty good revenue for a transit system. Utah's come a long way from when I first started, and there was only a 0.25 sales tax available for transit. You had to do everything with that.
In Maryland, it's not impossible, but it is difficult. The city does not have the authority to levy such a tax. As I understand it, it would take a special act of the legislature to grant the city permission for such a levy. But I'm really interested in that. It's obviously an important source of revenue for you, and we can only envy.
Well, a long time coming, as I said. But I think that we've only had a couple tax referenda fail. And not in every location. So generally, I think it's about an 80% success rate in Utah. Generally, communities want more transit, and they've seen the negative impacts of growth in their communities, in their neighborhoods, and they see the transit as part of that solution. Congestion, and we also have air quality problems here. So,
okay. Any other questions before we give Jerry the floor? I know he's got more to tell us.
I think Alderwoman Tierney has been trying to ask a question.
Ah, yes. Oh, welcome, Ellie.
Oh, yes, thank you. Quick question. The hotel tax is part of your revenue. Is the hotel tax totally dedicated to transit, or are you just taking a portion of it?
No, I think we just get a small portion. A lot of it goes to various other projects.
Okay. Do you mind me asking what Or,
I don't
is-
know, but I can get back to you.
oh, that's okay. Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Actually, I'm the on the committee with Kurt and John Purnell, who we're the ones studying this. And I wouldn't mind knowing how much, because that is something, I mean, I don't think we should disregard any
Right.
avenue to how we can make this work.
Yeah, that's what I
So-
was getting at. So thank you,
Yeah.
Beth. So you'll be the recipient of that information. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I also would love to have a copy of all your slides, because I'm
We have them
writing.
already, so
Oh, you do?
that's covered,
Oh, 'cause you
yes.
hadn't put them out to anybody.
I just
So-
got them.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I'm writing furiously, but the slides will help. So,
Yeah, I'm happy to send a kind of a recap on the taxes, because I think it is really interesting. And, you know, we've got a spreadsheet that we can share that has, you know, the tax code number and all that. So you could look into the Utah State, what we've done and how it would compare to Maryland.
okay. Thank you very much.
Kurt, this is Elvia. I have a question.
Yes.
I joined late and I apologize if you covered this already, but what is fueling the buses that you mentioned? Are they electric buses?
We
Yeah,
have
they are converted.
electric. Yeah, we have 13 electric buses right now, and we have a goal that by 2030, they'll be all electric.
Fantastic.
No, we envy you. All right, Jerry, you had an even larger view of things in the state.
Well, we
Kurt,
wanted to
can
give you
I,
a little bonus
Kurt, can I-
content today.
Mhm.
So I'm going to share with you some of our experience at the Utah Transit Authority as it relates to free fare and just fare policy generally. So I was the president and CEO of UTA before leaving there in 2018 and starting a consulting practice. And it's as a consultant that I've gotten to work with Park City and spend time with them. So this is based on my experience back 2018 and earlier. As I mentioned, it's mostly local sales tax that funds transit across the state. And there's a tiny bit of state DOT money that goes to transit, but primarily it's a local option sales tax. UTA has a $2.50 base fare that covers about 18% of their operating expenses. It has had a fare all along. It's never been a free fare system. But we were very creative, as it sounds like you are trying to be, to figure out how do we find additional sources of revenue so we can add more service, and also so that we can subsidize the fare for people who need it the most. So for a long time, we have engaged in fare discount or fare subsidy programs. Our largest programs are with the universities and school districts, secondary schools, and employers and event venues. And the idea is we go to these universities and large employers and ask them to fully underwrite the cost of the fare. And in fact, the state of Utah participates in that program for about 15,000 state employees. And so then it makes the fare free for the rider. And what we find, very generally in those programs is you pretty quickly double your ridership. And as long as you're getting paid for all of the lost fare revenue, you're better off. We occasionally would have capacity problems with the university, so we'd have to add service, which increased our cost, but those have been very successful for the transit agency, and they continue to expand during my time there. And in the last year I was there, we were getting ready to open a brand new bus rapid transit line that connected a commuter rail station, a university, a state university, and a private university, Brigham Young University. And then the entire commercial district between those, about 10 miles long. Both those universities wanted the fare to be free on that BRT system. And so they both joined on with extensive fare subsidy. So both of those universities provide They prepay the fare for all their students, faculty, and staff, and the families of their faculty and staff. So it's a broad fare program that makes it free for all of those folks to use.
So it's free for a segment of the passengers, not for all, just.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Now, the BRT further was able to access some, I don't know if this was congestion management, air quality money. There was some grant that was provided to make the BRT line free to everyone. So the students are able to use the whole system throughout the region, all of the buses, but with the grant from the local MPO, everyone is able to use the BRT without paying a fare. We also we went to a number of underwriters to support free fare days. So these were really air quality incentives and an opportunity to get people to come out and try transit. So we had the local newspaper underwrite it one time. The Salt Lake City underwrote the free fares on bad air days. And then this last session, the state legislature set aside money to provide transit free of charge to everyone on, I think, 15 days during the year when the air quality is bad. So I think that kind of what's happening is, UTA is sort of nibbling away at the fare, finding ways to make it free to the rider by having someone else underwrite the cost of it.
Can I ask a question about that?
Yeah.
So you said, for example, that newspapers would underwrite the fare.
Yeah.
And what, for them, is that coming out of their advertising budget or?
So they, this was a long time ago we did this. They paid some portion of a day's fare revenue. So I think that the cash fare revenue was about $50,000 for one day. And I think we negotiated something like $30,000. So they were paying for that right out of their, I don't know what revenue source they used. There was another time we did it where you actually had to show a paper. So the paper was your fare. That was kind of the first iteration of that. So yeah, they were basically underwriting what would have been cash fare revenue for that day.
Do these partial subsidies give you optimism that there's a path toward dropping the $250 base fare to zero?
Yeah, so there are a couple other things that are pushing in that direction. So one is this Wasatch Front Central Corridor study. This was completed a few years ago, and what it was looking at is how to manage the travel demand all the way to the year 2050. And it looked at scenarios where you would build additional freeway capacity, scenarios where you would increase transit service, and free fare was a component of the modeling they did. And at the end of the study, what they concluded and the scenario that they recommended was a scenario where transit service was doubled, transit was made fare free, and then there was all the technology to do lane management and metering and so forth on the freeways. But the bottom line was, in the preferred scenario, they could handle all of the travel demand up to the year 2050 without building additional lanes of freeway. So that's a big opportunity for the community, and the free fare transit was a big part of the modeling that made that happen. So I think that started to get people's attention. And then in the recent mayoral race of a couple of years ago, there were a couple mayoral candidates in Salt Lake City who were campaigning on free fare transit system-wide. So I think it got a lot more attention. What I will say as a former transit CEO, I have become a convert. So I spent most of my working career worrying about how are we going to manage, how are we going to make up the revenue loss. So at UTA, it's about $55 million out of a $300 and something million program. And if you look at what UTA has done already, about a third of that 55 million is being paid by third parties, most of whom are public sector tax supported entities like the state of Utah and the University of Utah and so on. So I think, UTA has already made a lot of progress toward a fare free program. It just, like anything else, it needs political will and a champion. And I think, at the time that kind of person arises, I think you could see UTA get the rest of the way there. The public really likes it. So that's the other thing. When the mayor's race was up, they did a survey and 71% were in favor of free fare.
That's great. All right.
So I have another question. That picture you have has a trolley.
Yes.
What percent do you have? What's the breakdown between trolley and bus? And do you have any plans to do more trolley versus electric bus?
You want me to try? We have one trolley. It goes up and down Main Street, which is, for those of you that have not been to Park City, Main Street is quite steep and very long. It has great restaurants and retail, and it's a place that everybody likes to go. But after a long day of skiing, it can be difficult to walk that street. So the trolley goes up and down. We would love to have an electric trolley and are putting our eyes on that. They exist out there in the world. And we are in the middle of our updating our short range transit plan right now that will look at things like, how do we best service neighborhoods? And one of the ideas we floated around is, should we have more trolleys and to like create kind of circular
When you
loops
say
within the neighborhoods.
When you say electric trolley, you mean without catenary lines? Is that what you
Yeah,
mean?
just like the, electric battery powered.
Got it.
Yeah.
John Purnell, did you have a question?
I did not. I've been enjoying listening to it
Oh.
all, and thank you
No,
all
I
very
thought-
much.
I thought I heard you trying to break in at one point. Okay.
I
Well,
have a question.
yes, for your information, Kwaku is the director of our transit operations
Acting.
here.
Good to meet you.
Yeah, good. Quick question on your electric buses. Who is the maker of that?
Park City has 13 Proterra buses.
Proterra. Okay.
The first 6 are their Catalyst model, and the most recent ones are from 2019. There are the E2 long range. And Park City is also partnering with the Utah Transit Authority for procurement of 14 Gillig battery electric buses with the Cummins drivetrain.
Okay. What are their sizes? 30 or 40 footer?
We have both 35 and 40 foot.
Okay, so you don't have any 30 yet.
No.
Okay. Average price, any idea?
$1 million. So the most recent, yeah. If you include the battery in the full capital cost of the bus, they're still running pretty over $900,000 each.
Okay, all right, thank you. One more question on I think is the Park City Transit, which shows 15 minutes headways. Is it throughout the day or during the AM and PM peak periods?
So there's a little bit of reduction in frequency in the late evenings, but primarily Park City runs service from early in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning-ish until after 1 a.m. And most of the frequency, most of those routes stay at high frequency until after 11. So it's a lot of service. People rely on it to get around to jobs and to go out to the restaurants and get back to where they're staying without having to have a car in the city.
All right, thank you.
Park City is physically constrained between some rather steep terrestrial features on either side of it. And You have the virtue of necessity in as one of the things that's driving your acceptance of transit as a way of moving people around. We have some of those physical barriers, mostly in the form of water, rivers in the Chesapeake Bay and so forth. But in a sense, I think we would have more easy public acceptance if we had the same kinds of physical constraints that you do.
Looks like there are a couple other questions. Folks have their hands raised.
Zoe does.
Question. I'm looking at the picture there on the left, and it shows overhead electrification. And I'm familiar with those systems from my days of living in Seattle. And I'm wondering, is that in the new electric buses that are on the market and that are, regions are purchasing, are they still reliant on overhead electric cables, or is that a technology that's being phased out?
So this is a picture of the UTA Trax light rail. So if you didn't have those bushes in the way, you'd see the steel wheels, and it's running on a rail. So UTA has a bus system, about 650 vehicles, a light rail system, 100 and commuter rail system, about 140 miles of rail altogether. So diesel, commuter rail locomotives, and then electric. These are all Siemens light rail vehicles.
Okay, so that above that red bus there, those aren't hooked to the electric cable, but on top.
They're not hooked to the bus. It's hooked
Okay.
to the light rail car behind it. So what I would say about trolley buses or overhead catenary powered electric buses, it's a real niche market, and outside a few communities like San Francisco and I think
Seattle
Cleveland.
have those.
Yeah, they're being phased out.
Okay.
You know what I'm realizing, whoever asked the trolley question, the trolley we have right now is a diesel bus, just it's shaped like a trolley.
Right.
So that's why we want to turn that into electric powered.
David DeQuincio has a hand up as well.
Yes, thanks, Kurt, and thank you, Sarah and Jerry. This is really good, really helpful, very informative. I have a couple of questions.
Get into that.
About do you, and this, let's start, Sarah, with you in Park City. Do you have demographic data
I'm on a meeting right now.
Charles, can you mute?
Depending on how bored I am, it might be soon.
Charles, can you mute? Yeah.
He's not.
Yeah, there we go.
I was wondering if you have demographic data on who your ridership base. And I would have the same question for Jerry in terms of educational attainment, income, occupation, etc.
We don't really have that specific data. We do a lot of surveying, and we have a lot of ridership data and information about where people are going, but we haven't done a deep dive into demographics. Jerry, correct me if I'm wrong.
We have a little bit of information from the Onboard Survey, and Park City is a very unique place. So it's this bimodal customer distribution where you have lots of people with household incomes above $200,000 a year, and then lots of people with household incomes below $60,000 a year. So both those groups are riding the Park City system regularly. In the Utah Transit Authority, because it's such a large system serving 6 counties, the demographic mix is quite different depending on where you are. So serving the Central Business District and the University of Utah, it tends to be a higher income, more professional workforce. And if you look at the local routes in communities in the southwest part of Salt Lake County or the west side of Utah County, it's primarily lower income households without a car or with only one car, more of what you'd call transit dependent.
That's interesting. And it I ask that question for a couple of reasons. I have followed goings on throughout the state of Utah for many years. It fascinates me how some of the planning charrette processes that have been done in Salt Lake have been first of their kind, or held up as exemplary both for land use and transportation planning. And politically, it just fascinates me that a quote unquote red state has done such a terrific job and I've been to Salt Lake. I haven't been to Park City, but that your area is such a leader and supports transit. So hats off to everybody who helped make that happen. But I don't think I'd be doing my job as a member of this board if I didn't bring up a difficult topic, one that we are going to have to deal with here. One of the questions I have and one of the concerns that I read about from time to time is that that maintenance costs of the vehicles on fare-free services are higher due to vandalism. Is that not something you see?
Not so much. I mean, we get a little bit, but it really isn't a big topic of a big issue that is on our radar.
All right, I'm delighted to hear that because we have I also follow the I'll call them sayings. They're really rantings of transit opponents, and they often trot out the C word, crime. The transit brings crime. There was an issue here during the pandemic on our light rail system in Baltimore, which it was completely absurd, where there were some unfortunate incidents at one of the stations, and partly due to limitations in law enforcement resources, and the residents of that area, which have never been really supportive, light rail was kind of foisted on them. They didn't really want it, is the history that I've read. And so they, of course, are calling for the system to be shut down. If I had the chance to speak to them, I would say, well, geez, at any given moment, I'm sure somewhere on I-95 are, criminals are traveling up and down, human traffickers are traveling up and down I-95, stolen goods are moving up and down I-95. And so the answer to crime is, whether we're talking about roads or transit, the answer to crime is law enforcement, right? Along with better economic opportunities for people so that there are alternatives to being criminals, right? So I would like to be on solid ground when we as a board say, hey, going fare free is a good idea for a number of reasons, and it won't cause crime or vandalism problems. There's at least one place we can point to that has gone fare free and has not experienced a increase in crime or vandalism. I just want to be on solid ground if we say that.
Yeah,
David, I've interviewed 9 different cities around the United States on their fare-free system. Some of them have always been fare-free, like Park City. Some of them have went over to fare-free, and not one of them has had a crime problem on their buses. Now, when they one of the things they do have is endless riders. It can be a problem. They have all said it's easy to control. It's easy to control and treat those riders fairly and treat them with dignity, but it is something that can happen. The driver normally knows all their regular customers, all the regular riders. And the driver has the authority to limit people from coming on the bus if they're a problem or if they are endless riders or whatever. And but not one of them has had a prime issue dealing with having fare-free riders and not
Beth,
in the buses.
Right, and Beth, you're very happy to hear that, and I'm not surprised to hear that. I only bring it up because there are transit opponents in this town, and there are transit opponents who are funded by think tanks who have radar out for transit initiatives locally that they can stick their noses into. And you'll get people here like Randall O'Toole and some others. So I just want for us to be mindful, to be ready for, now we may be, ready for those people if they come here.
Okay. I'm just telling you that I asked that specific question, and that's the answer I get. And that is the answer I've gotten from everybody. I mean, I do ask the specific question.
Yeah, that's great. That's great.
Yes, this is Kwaku here. I think, Sarah, you did mention that you're looking for electric trolley, right? You can send me an email. I do have a contact person. They do have a trolley, electric trolley coming up with the Volvo electric drive train. I can send you the contact information. He is with Bus, ROHRER, and I can give you the contact person for that. He did bring a clean diesel one, very nice in green color for us to see, but we are not interested. But he did indicate that they have an electric version coming up very soon. So I can send you the contact information for that.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
All right.
It looks like you're still muted, Kurt.
I think we've come to the point in the agenda where we must thank Jerry and Sarah for coming and providing an amazing view of a system that we would like to emulate if we can find a path to do it. And our own analysis is I'm gratified to say, is pointing in that direction. And we hope to complete our work on this and make a recommendation to our city council sometime within the next few weeks or so. So thank you so much for coming and telling us about both Park City and Utah. And you've given us some information that I think we can use to our advantage.
Great. Thanks so much for having us.
You're welcome. Good luck to you.
Thank you.
All the best to you.
Bye.
You bet. Bye. All right, moving on in the agenda. You have all been given the minutes as produced by Kara last month. Thank you so much for doing that. Can I have a motion to approve? And of course, we'll entertain any corrections, additions that you feel are necessary.
I'll move.
Seconded. Oh, you
Okay.
did it. Sorry.
Any discussion? None? All in favor?
Aye.
All right, the minutes are approved. Public participation, I have no notice of anybody apart from those already here. Thank you, Alderwoman Tierney, for joining us in this month. I know you're decompressing after an election and so forth. Congratulations on your return.
Oh, thanks, Kurt. Thank you very much. And I didn't have a conflict tonight, so hopefully I'll plan it so that I don't with
good.
the next term.
Are you back in town?
Me? I'm back in town. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I'm
I know
here.
you.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. We have only one committee active at the moment, to my knowledge, and we'd like to give you a quick digest on where our committee of three, me, John Purnell, and Beth Dolezal, are in examining this fare-free option for the city of Annapolis. We have been meeting and writing and discussing and meeting with experts in the city, and have made significant progress, about which we will tell you today. I'll give you just a quick summary before Beth and John launch into some more detail. We have a white paper which has gone through 2 drafts, and as a result of conversations here tonight and additional work that we will be doing, we're going to finish the white paper. John has started a view graph digest of all of our work, and he's going to show you a preview of that tonight. And Beth, as well as I, have been talking to cities around the country to try to get a flavor of their own experience, to learn from their successes, and to try to identify pitfalls on the way toward fare free. Our plan is to finalize our drafts of those 2 documents, the white paper and the view graph presentation, and to circulate them among members of the board prior to our next meeting, at which we will have a full discussion and I hope a vote to take a board position on this subject. Our plan then is to provide, and this may occur in advance of our final vote, is to provide courtesy briefings to both the Transportation Committee. Ellie, is that meeting at all in December, or is the first meeting going to be in January?
First meeting's in January.
Yeah,
they're not meeting in December. There's no meetings in December, I don't believe.
That's correct. You have a meeting of the first city council in
Right.
December, that is
Correct.
okay. So we plan courtesy briefings to the Transportation Committee and to the mayor and the finance director at an appropriate time. So we're planning to use our next meeting to try to wrap this up in the Transportation Board. I point out a difficulty. Our next meeting is scheduled for January 20th. We've looked at trying to ask you to do that earlier, anticipating holiday problems, but that's difficult for a couple of reasons. May I ask you now, how many of you can attend the December 20th meeting, which is on the calendar? Okay, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's pretty good.
I thought we were going to ask to move it forward a week.
Yes, but we can't.
We can't?
No, there's
and there's a number of reasons why that didn't make sense anymore.
Yeah.
And that changed between yesterday and today.
Right. Oh, okay, guys. Thanks for letting me know.
It changed again about 45 seconds ago with Ellie's answer.
I see.
Yes.
Okay.
All right. So we will plan to have a December 20 meeting, and then go home and celebrate. So the first meeting of the city council, if we vote in our next meeting to make recommendations to the city, will occur in January, and we'll plan to have to forward those recommendations to city council at that time. Now, I have a question for Alderwoman Tierney. One of the things we've discussed is what actions, if we make a recommendation for an action, such as conversion to fare-free transit, it's been my presumption that some kind of action by the council would be required. Certainly if there are budget implications, and maybe for other reasons too. But I'd like to ask for your opinion on what discretion the mayor and the city manager might have to take actions along these lines, independent of legislation. Do you have an opinion on that?
I think my thought is, because it currently is involved in the budget cycle. You know, our parking revenue supports transportation, et cetera. And there's that interrelationship that I just think that it has to go through somehow the finance department. I cringe when I say it would have to go before the finance committee, because that's another, you know, committee review before it gets to the council. So I don't think this is not, no, I don't think this is something that just the city, because even when I introduced the pilot, that was a budgetary decision and it needed council approval. Remember, I tried to get the 90-day pilot.
Mm. Yeah, I'm not surprised to hear that. That's kind of
Yeah.
what I expected, but I just wanted to check with you.
I can ask David. I mean, I talk to him every day. I can ask David Jarrell and get back to you on what kind of process. And Kwaku could help me out here.
Yeah, generally council sets the fare. Because of that, if it's going to be free, I think it will go through the same process where there will be kind of a resolution or something of that nature for council to basically refer it to the finance committee and the transportation committees. And then
yeah, so that's kind of the track that we were on, the three of us, that we will make our board recommendations to the city council. And at that point, the council will decide what additional review, transportation committee, finance committee, what other parts of the city apparatus need to be cranked in.
Well, you know, it would be fun if I could get you on the first city council work session. Then you have the council's, you know, full attention, and you make a presentation. Then.
When would that be?
I don't know. I assume it's in. We wouldn't have one in December. It would be in January. But it's the second or fourth Thursday of the month. There's nothing. I'm looking at the website
Thursday?
now.
Isn't it the Thursday before the council meeting usually?
Yeah. There's not. I'm looking at the calendar now. There's nothing showing, you know, projecting out that I see.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just a thought.
Yeah, that's. Thanks for mentioning that. That had not occurred to us, and we'll crank that into our thinking.
Yes, if you can just get back with us with some dates and so that we know what
they're probably already on the Legistar.
She said there's nothing on there. She said there's nothing on there.
I'm trying to find it, but on my phone.
Oh, actually, yeah, no, I looked at it this morning. There's nothing in January.
Yeah, right.
Nothing has made it.
Nothing. Thank you. I couldn't find it either.
Yeah, just to add my support to the work session, I think that would be the best starting point for you to have a full discussion instead of through the normal city council meetings. The work session gives you much more time to elaborate whatever that you are recommending and take questions from that. So I think that would be a very good starting point with city council work session.
Yeah.
One of the things that's very much on our mind is this question of time. The Hillman garage is about to come down, and the city is going to be facing something of a transportation crisis. It seems to me that the time to take on this may be one of those issues that needs to be cranked in. It's an opportunity. For a time, at least, the city is going to have to markedly change the way it addresses its transportation needs, and fare free may be a useful support to that whole thing. So anyway, we're going to try to move as fast as we can. I'd like to stop talking and move first to Beth, who's been talking to a number of cities. You gave this summary last time, but to the extent that there's additional progress, let us know.
Yes, there is. I've talked to some more cities, one being Olympia, Washington, actually today. And the interesting thing is, for me, is that all the questions that I asked, which there's 16 or 17 questions, never mind just talking and them telling me about their system, like we just listened to Utah, Park City. they're all the same. I mean, they all have the same benefits to the city, the same benefits to the riders, the same feelings for fare free and how important it is. It's just amazing to me that they're just if nothing changes. There's not one thing that's really different. So I think that it's a good way. I mean, it gives us a lot of very firm information because we're not getting a lot of little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit everywhere else. It's given us firm information. And even Alexandria, Virginia, who I actually talked to first, along way back in before they actually went fare free. They were going to go fare free, and so I talked to them in August, and they went fare free the beginning of September, and they already have a 26% increase in ridership. Now they did something that others haven't done, and they've been lauded for it, and that is that they have actually also redid their route systems. They went into new neighborhoods, and they did, and they've redone their routes. So they really picked up passengers that way. But that is something that we might want to look at too. And others have done that, by the way, as well. Sometimes not exactly with their free fare or fare free when they went fare free, but they did it in the meantime. Although Olympia, Washington did it at the same time because they did a 2-year study outreach with their community to find out what people really wanted. And then went and instituted it along with fare free and along with a tax, a pretty good tax as well. So, but everybody wanted it. It passed by 66% because people want good transportation.
A gratifying summary of all of these things might be that it's really positive. Once these things go in, they grow in popularity.
Absolutely. And they become pride for the community that they have this transit system that really works and works for everyone. And by the way, socioeconomic, all of them said that they did not see a change in the socioeconomic riders. What they saw was more riders. They also saw riders taking shorter rides. So instead of walking a mile to save $2, they now that it's free, they'll take the ride. But they didn't see any real change. One of the things that when they did a couple of the cities I talked to said that riders were concerned with if they went fare free, that there'd be a downgrade in the system. That was the one thing they did not want to happen, is they did not want a downgrade in the system. They'd like an upgrade, but they didn't want their system degraded. So that's something we have to think serious about and really make sure that we don't do that, because
the last thing we want to do is to pay for that the missing fare by degrading the service. That's the last thing we want.
Yeah. So that's really so much of what I've found has been already discussed. In fact, a lot of what the Park City said was what I found in everything, and so I think that's really the end of that I can think of.
Okay.
What I've been doing.
Thanks so much, Beth. Now, John has been doing a lot of work on this, particularly from the financial end, and has a preview of a slideshow that we will be developing.
And I have to demonstrate that I can, in fact, do this. Here we go. Are you seeing the slides?
Yes.
Yes, we are.
All right. So again, this is a first draft. We've kicked it around a little bit amongst Beth and Kurt and I, and we're still populating with data. But since we're speaking on behalf of the board, I felt it was important to share what we're doing with the whole board as we develop it. So you can input to it and give us your thoughts, and I would encourage those comments while I run you through this. It's only about 14 slides. It's pretty short, and I'm going to go through it fairly quickly because it's still kind of early content. So these goals should no longer be news to you. We were looking to increase ridership, improve access to your workplaces and to shopping, to remove a barrier for underclass success, and to decrease carbon emissions, improve our system's efficiency, and demonstrate the effectiveness of the administration. So I'm going to walk you through the current transit system, the fare-free concept. Benchmarks is still pulling together. Some thoughts about Annapolis in particular. We don't have an implementation timeline yet, and if I did have one, it would have changed in the last 30 minutes. So there we are. So current transit system. I'm assuming you all know this bus map of our system, and that we have 7 routes and 1 circulator and 1 state shuttle. And the paratransit kind of operates everywhere on demand, right, Kwaku?
I need to ask a question. I just realized. Kwaku, is he there?
He is there.
He was.
Yeah.
He may have left. Yes, Kwaku, is our paratransit free?
No, but you can make it free. The FTA allows you to charge up to twice the regular fare. So we charge $4 for a one-way ride on the paratransit.
Okay, because one of the things I realized today, because the lady from Olympia, Washington reiterated it, and it's been reiterated to me before, that if you have fare-free transit, you have to have fare-free paratransit, they said.
Yes.
So that, so do
zero
we,
is zero.
so do we have to figure that in with what we're doing?
Yes, please.
So
I think it's calculated in.
It is calculated in?
I think I've got it in there. Now,
okay, because we've
mind
never.
you, we're going to review this with Kwaku. We're going to review this probably with the Economic Committee. So.
Okay, that's okay. It's just that we haven't really discussed paratransit. Not me, not you, not Kurt. And so I wanted to be sure. That's all.
As you can see from the numbers here, it's not a big number. It's not $7,000-8,000 a year. By the way, these numbers, not these numbers. I'll come to the dollar figures in a minute. But all the numbers I'm sharing with you tend to be from the 2018-2019. We've just didn't feel confident using the 2020 and 2021 financials because of COVID. It just so disrupted our ridership. Didn't disrupt the expenses, but it totally made huge damage to our revenue. So I'm going to base this on what I hope is the norm. I think we've said this before, but this is the first time you've seen what our real revenue looks like. And only 6.9% comes from the fares. The vast majority of our income comes from state grants and transfers from the parking fund and the general fund and some county grants. The rest of it is pretty much in the noise. Advertising, hardly even relevant. Some federal grants, but not a lot. And this orange wedge right here is the state shuttle that runs up to the Navy Stadium that the state gives us money to operate for them. Our average cost per rider, as I calculated, and Kwaku, tell me this is cost per rider, not revenue, is about $17. That feel right to you? Okay, I'm going to take that as a year.
I have to look at the numbers and the year that you used.
18 and 19.
Well, we normally operate on fiscal years. I don't know whether you are referring to FY 2018.
They are fiscal years. These are all fiscal years.
2019, yeah.
These are all fiscal year. Yep.
Yeah.
I'll go through them with you, and if you want to take I don't have to answer that question now. That's fine.
Sure, we can arrange, and then you can go over the data.
Yep. So the concept is we make the public transit system free, including paratransit. I think we removed the fare boxes. We cancel the cash pickups. We actually gain an efficiency in the bus system because the driver and the passenger don't have to mess with fares. So the time on the bus is increased by a few seconds, and in some cases minutes if there's an issue with exact change or something like that. It would reduce personal car trips into Annapolis. And I would agree with what Kurt said. I think promoting this in conjunction with the Hillman Garage would be fabulous if we could figure out how to get this approved in time. In the meantime, it's, maybe what we use is funding from the construction project, which I think planned on having additional transportation. So maybe that's a solution for the short term.
John, as you suggested, the collecting fares does slow the bus. It takes a lot of time and bus driver attention to take care of the fare collection process. There's also this question of security and conflict. One of the things that we came across in examples around the country is that collecting fares is a source of conflict between drivers and patrons. And avoiding that whole thing has a public benefit aside from speeding the bus.
Oh, agreed. I tell you one other thing is not having cash on the bus is a deterrent to crime.
Yeah.
They won't be thinking they can get money from the driver, which I know happens occasionally. We haven't filled this in, so Kurt and Beth may need to speak to it a little bit. Can you all hear me okay?
Yeah.
My system is telling me I've got low volume, which is so rare. We're starting to collect and fill in. We have a lot of this data. I just don't have it on the slide. These are the cities we've talked to. We're trying to make sure that we can sort of paint this picture so as we make assumptions going into the financial model, we feel comfortable we're making the right assumptions. Right now, I'm estimating a 25% increase in ridership. I would say that's probably at the low end of all the numbers we've heard. Beth and Kurt, would you agree?
Yeah.
Yep. And then the actual benefits to the city and the riders, we're filling all that in. For us, one of the considerations is the state employee shuttle. It's important to us to not characterize that as a fare-based bus service, but instead as a accommodation for the state to move their employees that's specific to the state. So we're saying that in an attempt to preserve the $250,000 a year of state revenue that we get.
Yeah, that's a major employer, and we have discussed somehow drawing additional employers into this loop as a source of revenue. I don't have a clear idea how we would do it. We heard from Park City today how they did it, and it's a way of covering some of these shortfalls.
Anne Arundel County has just embarked, well, a little bit ago, embarked on a free fare, an interim free fare pilot. I think it's mostly COVID driven. Wasn't that right, Beth and Kurt?
Yes, it was. And they plan on going back to fares, they said.
But that may change if this is well received and their ridership is good. We have the circulator, which operates free fare free today. And the question is, okay, does that just become a redundant route if we go to zero fare? And that's a question that I think we haven't answered yet, but it's part of this special Annapolis mix. The Hillman Garage demolition and downtown redevelopment, as Kurt pointed out, are creating a parking crisis that free fare is in an ideal position to solve. And I think there's a lot of good bonus points for the mayor and the councilman, the alderman, to figure out a way in which we can tie the two together and show that we're doing something productive while we're doing something productive. Takes away a little of the intermediate hurt. In the financial model, I've assumed that 75,000 trips per year are now taken by car and not by bus. And that is it's 25% of the, I think it's roughly, 300,000 is our roughly annual ridership. And the average distance I used was 4 miles. Kwaku, you might be able to give me a better number there, but I sort of eyeballed it at about 4 miles. That actually meant that, and I also got some data off the web that said for every mile driven, you don't put almost a pound of CO2 in the air, and that the average fuel efficiency is 20 miles per gallon, and that adding a passenger to the bus is virtually zero cost. It doesn't create another gas emission because the passenger is such a tiny percentage of what the bus is already doing. So if those assumptions are true, we can go forth and say to the public that we expect free fare to generate 125 tons of CO2 saved per year and 15,000 gallons of gas by getting rid of those trips. That's just a part of the benefit here is that we'd have a greener Annapolis. The financial analysis, the 25% change in ridership we talked about, there is an roughly $8,000 a year cost for Brinks to come pick up all of our cash and take it to the bank safely. That cost can go away. We haven't, Kwaku, nailed down the cost of maintaining the fare boxes, and I think that's something we should get in this model when we can. And there may be some labor costs in Kwaku's group for not having to handle any cash, for not having to handle the vouchers, the passes, all that goes away in a zero fare system. So that's something we need to talk about. We have decided to assume a ramp up of 2 years to get to the 25% change in ridership. I actually think that's quite conservative. I think it'll happen faster. And that we would start in the fourth quarter of fiscal year 22, which if we approved it for the January Hillman Garage meant that we would, be up and operating somewhere in the April to June timeframe at a zero fare basis. The next really important one, and I probably want to focus on this one, and Kwaku, I think we might need your help confirming it, is that the state, federal, and county grants will track linearly to ridership without any substantial delay. It's not going to come 5 years from now. That as our ridership grows, the grant income should grow. We've talked about that, but I don't think we've ever said that it's a 1-for-1, that if our ridership doubled, our grants would double. But it's turning out to probably be the most important underlying financial assumption on this page, and that the state shuttle revenue remains unchanged. And if that's the case, here are our financials with a projection for the 3 years, fiscal 22, fiscal 23, and fiscal 24, that show primarily what happened to revenue here is our grant funding increased and made up for the missing fare revenue we were collecting. So we got 6.9% less revenue, but we got 25% more because we had better ridership from the grant funding. So you can now see how that grant funding is becoming the real linchpin of what we're looking at here. And then this is probably going to change after tonight's conversation, but this is kind of our path forward. So that is the quick and dirty briefing that we would like to keep refining, take to the Transportation Committee, take to the mayor and financial manager and Kwaku, and take to ultimately would become the basis for whatever we recommend to the city council, hopefully in our December 20th meeting. There you go, Kurt.
Yes, thank you.
I have one thing to say about that you said. A couple of the people, I didn't ask that question and I should have, but a couple of maybe even 3 of the cities I talked to or transportation areas I talked to said that the increased ridership did not increase their cost of their system. That they were able to incorporate the increased ridership in what they already had. They didn't have to put on more buses. They didn't have to hire more workers. There was nothing that they did that they had to do to handle that increased ridership. So if it turns out that, to me, if funding doesn't increase by the increase of your ridership, then I don't think that sinks us, because there's a likelihood is that we're not going to have higher operating costs.
I would concur with that. Yep.
Yeah.
Other questions?
Yes.
Kara?
Yeah, this is more for
Yeah.
Kwaku, I think. Well, two questions. Is this done in any other comparable or any other city in the state of Maryland? And that ties into my second question on our, our grant from Maryland. If how are they receptive to free ridership programs, Kwaku? With that,
Baltimore does it.
Okay.
And I haven't talked to them yet, though.
Generally, the state doesn't get in your way of free ridership.
They
so
don't
far
what?
as the state doesn't get into any way when the transit agency wants to provide free transit service. The only question that they will ask is, what are your sources of revenue to pay for your local share or anything beyond the transit? So the state does not really get involved in this. It's a local decision. Even for setting the fares, the state doesn't get involved. Again, it's a local decision that the transit agency and the local government actually.
Ellie, were you asking for cities in Maryland that we might compare ourselves to?
No, it was really related to how the state reacts to the state of Maryland, and it reacts to the free ridership program, and if there was any jeopardy with our funding from Maryland.
No.
Yeah, sounds like there isn't. So that's good.
What I do know, I think John did indicate that if you increase your ridership, there is a possibility of you getting more grants. For now, I don't think that is a correct statement, because the state already is aware that the money we do get is not enough. So even they have created a term, local overmatch. Typically, if the state gets more money, then they pass it on to various transit agencies. Where the fare casts the transit and the state revenues go down, we similarly also see a reduction in our grants. That's what I know. If your free transit service actually increases the ridership to the point that we have capacity issues, then you can use that as a basis to request for additional capital grants to buy more buses. Because there is a requirement in terms of how much full the bus could be. So if you collect your data and your capacity of the bus is, I believe, over 120%, then that becomes a basis for you to request more capital grants, not operating, to buy more buses to basically alleviate the traffic and the capacity issues on the buses. That's what I know as of now. But we can set up a date and a time and talk about the data, and I can share with you my opinion about the data.
Okay, happy to do that.
All right, is there any other discussion?
I just want to thank you all. This looks like a lot of work. Really appreciate all the time that you all put into this.
Yeah, we're finding it both interesting and potentially valuable to the city in many, many ways. So we're enjoying our work on this. And
Kurt,
yeah,
I have a question. This is Zoe. Kwaku answered it a little bit on the state grants, but I was wondering for Beth, and when in talking to other communities, how reliant they've been on state grants and any risk associated with that in terms of a long-term funding strategy. I think Kwaku mentioned they can go up and down based on revenue, but if you're relying on a portion for operating from a state grant or a federal grant, there could be some volatility or risk associated with that, and just sort of how a community could overcome that in the long run, or if that's been an issue in terms of long-term sustainability of funding.
Not in any that I've talked to so far. Now, some of them are like Park City have instituted taxes. They may not have in the very beginning, but after it got going, they needed to, and they did, and it's worked very well. Others are run by getting money from major employers, especially in like an area like Hanover, New Hampshire, which is a very rural area. And their system has always been fare free. It's been since 1975 or something like that. And it was kind of started and initiated by Dartmouth College and by the big medical center, because they wanted to attract good people, and they wanted to give them easy transportation to the medical center. Well, now they are now funded by a tax for that, but they still fund feeders out into the rural areas. They fund feeders into the main system. So, and the same goes for out in Washington State, where Boeing is and stuff. A lot of them get a lot of funding from the major employers. So, us thinking about that as a possibility is not out of the realm of something that could happen.
Zoe, I have a thought on your question that I'd like to. Since the fare contribution to the total operating cost of the system is so small, I think the volatility that you are calling to our attention, the potential for volatility is so much larger than the fare contribution that I think it's a problem, but it's not one that is related to the contribution that fares make.
Yeah, well, let me say this, Zoe, regarding your question. In terms of the state funds, yes, it can go up and it can go down. A very recent example is our 2021 state grant for preventive maintenance. We used to get like just over $400,000. Because of the COVID and the state revenue went down, when the notice of award came in, it was zero. The reason being the state doesn't have enough funding. So the department went back to MTA and pleaded with them. And what they said was that if the state get additional funds, we will be in line for consideration. Later on, before the grant agreements came in, they did inform us that there is some additional state revenue. So they gave a sum, but not to the original amount. So our PM money, which is totally state funds, depending upon the state revenues, can go up and can go down. Not because we have done anything, because the state doesn't have the fund. So that is a fact. And this is a very recent example that we did experience. In fact, based upon the FY 2022 award notice, PM funds has not got back to the original amount prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. We are short by about, I believe, $45,000 short compared to pre-pandemic levels. So it's really how much impact it will have on us, I don't know, but it does happen, and it had happened to us.
All right, thank you, everybody. As productive and interesting as this conversation is, our main reason for presenting it today was to give you an idea of how far we've gotten. I'd like to invite everybody to provide your input, if you have any, to our work, and we will be sharing improved drafts of our work as it is developed. I'd like to go on to the rest of the agenda. This was really the only agenda item. So I'd like to go to our around the table session. Tara Ashmore, oh, let me tell you a little bit about our membership. I skipped over that at the beginning. We have a nominee who has been approved by the Transportation Committee. The full council has not acted on it yet, but we expect that Tara Ashmore will become a member representing and taking an at-large position. A table that I sent around erroneously listed Beth as being at-large, but in fact she is representing Ward 1. I have nothing further to contribute. Tom? Do you have Tom Schock?
Yeah, nothing from me.
All right. Elvia?
Nope, nothing for me.
All right. Well, I had a wonderful time at your electric vehicle demonstration. I didn't get to hear any of the topics though, but Jared Littman and I are both lusting after the same electric car.
Okay.
Oh, Elvia, my husband went with one of our neighbors and they just loved it. They just,
Yeah.
they couldn't talk enough about it. And he brought his little sheet home with him, and I think he's got it sequestered somewhere. I'm not quite sure where, but somewhere.
Well, great. Great. I want you to join the EV family.
Next car, probably.
So Kurt, are you getting a Rivian?
No, I like the Y model Tesla, but not until they make the improvements that are coming in about 6 months. Charles Brooks?
I don't have anything.
Thank you. Kara?
No updates from me.
All right. Carol, before you go, a lot of these systems that we have looked at around the country have colleges, universities with their special transportation requirements and capabilities. I don't see how that applies very strongly in the case of Annapolis. St. John's, I believe, has largely a residential population of students, as does the Naval Academy. So that population does not need the kind of mobility that transit would provide. Their staffs are another matter, though, and I think that's something we should look at more closely.
I'm well versed in how the shuttle system at University of Maryland manages to be fare free. So if that's something that you want to talk about, I can certainly provide more details.
Well, yes, if you can inject that facet into our final report, that would be great.
Mm-hmm.
Carol Kelly has rejoined us as a member, but does not appear to be here today. Vince?
No update.
All right. And John, we have heard from. Beth, I think, yeah, we three have talked quite a lot. Zoe?
Yeah. I don't have any updates tonight.
Okay. Kwaku?
Nothing new. I sent you the
Yes, I got the report, and I will send it around if you have not sent it to members already.
No, I received it.
I think I sent it to one of your email that you sent, so every member should receive a copy.
Wonderful,
of that.
thank you.
Just take a look at it. If you have any questions, let us know. We are still recovering from the pandemic, but there is a steady increase in ridership.
No, that's good news.
That's good news.
Well, cool. I appreciate you staying up to date on all things driving electric.
Oh yeah, actually, it's what we are at a stage where all that we need is the money. Alternatively,
That's all.
Yeah, MTA is conducting a feasibility study of all transit agencies in the state of Maryland to determine exactly what they will need to transition to zero-emission vehicles. So we believe that instead of the city rushing to try to get money to buy electric buses, I think it would be prudent for the city to wait for the MTA feasibility study. Because once it's put out, it could be the basis for even asking the state for more funding for electric buses and the charging infrastructure. So that will be coming up very soon. Actually, it's underway. We have received questionnaire from them that we are responding to. And after that, they will send a consultant to ADOT to assess the facility, ask questions about electricity suppliers and so on and so forth. So that is underway. I'm very much excited about that. And that will lay the kind of the blueprint for us to actually, in a more serious way, transition to zero emission vehicles.
And Kwaku, do you think that we'll be able to get some money from the federal infrastructure stuff that should be coming down the pike?
It may be possible. It depends upon the way that they frame it. I know that in the past, we have got some money to buy buses and all to help deal with the operating deficit. So much depends upon what FTA will do. So I'm waiting patiently to hear what is in for Annapolis.
Yeah, they're probably going to administer that through the state, I would think.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because Annapolis Transit is a sub-recipient. We are not direct recipient of FTA funds like Montgomery County or Prince George's County.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you. Does anyone present have new business to bring before the board? Hearing nothing, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Thanks so much for.
Before you do that, Kurt, can I just have a shameless bit of advertising on Thursday? On Thursday, we're presenting a talk on COP26. So we're going to have an overview of what the conversations in Glasgow were all about by Dr. Peter Goodwin of UMCS, University of Maryland Center for Environmental Studies, followed by a presentation by Ben Grumbles, the Secretary of the Environment from Maryland. And he's going to talk about what all those discussions and decisions in Glasgow mean specifically for Maryland.
Yeah.
So if you'd like to attend that Zoom call, please send me an email.
That's great. By the way, Olivia, my stepson just joined Ben Grumbles as his manager for climate change.
Wow. Cool.
So yeah, he's got an important new job. Yeah, can you just tell us when and where? Is this a Zoom presentation?
Yes, it's a Zoom on Thursday from 7 to 8:30 or so.
Could you just send us that info?
Yes, I will send it to everybody in the group here.
Terrific. Thanks. Thanks to all. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Right. All in favor? Thanks so much, everybody.